Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into, well, a concept that's quietly reshaping how we're judged, really every single day. It's this idea that judgment is increasingly based not really on what we mean, but on how we say it. That's right. The structure, the form of our language, what we call syntax, it's becoming this surprising, almost hidden basis for judgment, and sometimes alarmingly, even for guilt. So this deep dive, it's all about unpacking a really critical series called Guilty by Syntax. It's by Erickson Katz of ASEAN Research Initiative. Our mission here is to explore how this whole phenomenon plays out, in AI, in academia, across society, and to really try and grasp the ethical implications. The series makes a powerful case that in this age of algorithmic gatekeeping, AI authorship detectors, and let's face it, often hidden institutional bias, our syntax, how we put words together, it's basically been turned into a proxy for our identity, our credibility, even, our perceived morality.
It's a fascinating point, and what's really key here is the fundamental shift it represents. We seem to be moving away from trying to understand a speaker's actual meaning, their intent, and instead systems, and sometimes people are just fixating on the surface level form. Katz's series critiques what they actually call mechanistic gatekeeping of meaning. And what that means is seemingly small things, syntactic markers like specific grammar choices, maybe the overall tone, even just how a sentence is structured. These things can trigger misclassification or censorship, or sometimes even, moral condemnation. And this gets amplified when the judgments are made by, say, opaque algorithms or maybe really rigid institutional filters. It really makes you ask, doesn't it? What happens when the form of our language starts to override the human context and how we judge things? This series, fundamentally, it's a defense of reflection over reductionism, dialogue over just detection, and valuing plurality over this obsession with precision. It's a powerful reminder, as the series puts it so well, that a sentence is not a soul, but systems often pretend it is.
Wow, a sentence is not a soul. That's quite a statement. A powerful indictment, like you said, of where we are now. Okay, so with that framing, let's try and bring this down to earth a bit. What does this guilt by syntax actually look like? Where are the real world examples? Where does it, hit the ground?
It's playing out in quite a few areas. Concrete examples are, sadly, not hard to find. Take AI authorship detection tools, for instance. That's a big one right now. These systems can flag perfectly legitimate human writing as machine-generated. And it's not because the content is fake or plagiarized. Often it's because the tools are trained on really specific stylistic patterns. So they end up penalizing deviations. You get students, educators, maybe authors who speak multiple languages. They get discredited simply because their unique syntactic signatures, their own way of building sentences or choosing words, don't fit the expected mold.
Right, so their style is just different, and the machine says computer.
Exactly. Then there's academic gatekeeping. This is maybe more subtle, but just as impactful. In many, especially English-dominant scholarly spaces, there's often an unspoken idea of acceptable language. And that becomes a sort of proxy for academic worth, which, inadvertently creates these significant barriers for diverse voices. Basically says, well, your ideas might be okay, but your syntax, not quite right.
Yeah, I can see how that would shut people down.
Definitely. And then think about AI content moderation. We see ethical misfires there too.
Yeah.
AI models can completely delete or misjudge user prompts just because of the structural phrasing. They totally miss the actual intent. They're often programmed to look for specific word patterns or sentence structures that might signal a rule violation, even if the user meant something totally harmless or maybe was even criticizing harmful content using its own language.
So quoting something bad could get you flagged as bad yourself, just based on the words used.
Precisely. And a huge underlying issue here is bias in the linguistic training datasets these AI models learn from. This is where non-standard expressions, things like, say, Filipino English, or certain regional phrasings, or culturally specific ways of structuring sentences, they get penalized or simply misunderstood by the systems.
Why does that happen?
Well, often it's because the training data itself heavily overrepresents what's considered standard English. So the models just don't have enough examples of variations. They see something different, and they might categorize it as an error or even worse, as suspicious. And finally, just consider disinformation narratives. This is where form becomes a real weapon. Really polished, slick syntax can automatically gain trust, right? Even if the underlying content is completely false. But conversely, maybe unrefined, less polished, but truthful expressions. They often get ignored or flagged, regardless of their factual accuracy. The packaging dictates how it's received.
Okay, so that's a lot of ground covered. But the theme seems clear across all these examples. The guilt, as Katz calls it, isn't really about the idea or the truth or the intent behind what's being said. It lands solely on how the sentence is built, how the message is, well, packaged. So given all that, what does this really mean for you, for our listeners, when you communicate? Online or when you interact with these automated systems, how exactly does syntax, and we're using Katz's broader definition here, how does it lead to these kinds of misinterpretations, these misjudgments? Because as you said, the series explains syntax isn't just sentence structure, it's shorthand for this whole complex of algorithmic pattern recognition, institutional bias, interpretive shortcuts.
Exactly. And this is where it gets quite personal, raising important questions for you, the listener, about just communicating in this increasingly automated world. Systems designed to detect things like deception or authorship or maybe risk they usually rely on a reductionist approach. What that means is they simplify the incredible complexity of human meaning down to just a few surface-level cues that they can measure easily.
Like checkboxes.
Sort of, yeah. For example, maybe a passive tone is statistically linked to evasion in the dataset they were trained on. So passive tone equals evasive. Or short, abrupt phrasing might get read as aggression. Or, on the flip side, if something is too coherent, maybe too perfectly structured, the system might flag it. This must be AI generated.
Right, so you get to be human.
Exactly. But then if it's too unstructured, too messy, this must be fake news or unreliable. This kind of reductionism, this oversimplification, it leads to frequent false positives. You get students accused of cheating because their writing style tripped an algorithm. You get marginalized voices labeled as suspicious. Nuanced critiques get flagged as violations. The guilt, it doesn't come from what was truly meant. It comes from how a statistical model parsed the text. And the core insight here is really quite stark. The sentence is not wrong, but the system thinks the writer is. It makes you think, right, if I dash off a quick email, maybe late at night, and I'm a bit tired and maybe terse. Could an AI somewhere flag me as aggressive? It's taking a very human, context-dependent communication style and reducing it down to a simple, often incorrect, binary label.
That is. Yeah, that's powerful and frankly pretty unsettling. A bit chilling, actually.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it feels really vital to keep hold of that distinction, the profound difference between judging the substance, the meaning of a message, versus just judging its structure, its surface form. Our exploration here of guilty by syntax really reveals a significant challenge, maybe one of the core challenges in our increasingly algorithm-driven world, which is this ethical imperative we have to somehow move beyond just surface-level parsing and really try to understand human context and intent.
Absolutely. And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, it leaves us, and hopefully you, the listener, with a really compelling thought to chew on. In this era where algorithms are more and more interpreting our language, how can we possibly ensure our voices get heard accurately, especially those voices that might have non-standard expressions or unique styles? How do we stop them from being misjudged or maybe even just silenced by the system? And what responsibility do we have? As users, as creators of content online, do we have a responsibility to challenge these systems that seem to value form over essence?
Really important questions to consider. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. We definitely encourage you to reflect on these insights, think about them in your own communication, your own interactions, both online and off.